midway through. You're already more qualified than I am.
All right, everybody ready to get rolling on session 2? So we'll start with some introductions. Jamey, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamey Stevenson. I run Tech Valley Game Space, which is a co-working space for video game makers in Troy. Very kind of closely aligned with the center of gravity. They've been very supportive of us. And currently we're co-located in the same space, downtown Troy. And then beyond that, prior to forming Tech Valley Game Space 2 years ago, I've been a game developer going back a little over 10 years, both as a programmer and a game designer. And I've made a total of 1 virtual reality game.
Hi, my name is Owen. I'm the CEO of Spaceout VR. And Spaceout VR has been around, we started in the beginning of 2015. And we are actually based right upstairs from Tech Valley Game Space and right down the street from Valen Studios. And right down the street also from Ilium VR and Sebastian here. So there's a really exciting hub of activity going on in Troy. And you know, really happy to be here. So Spaceout VR, what we do is we create, we transform your digital life into automagical spaces that are...
I love automagical. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sebastian Sarbora. I'm CEO of Ilium VR. We make, immersive peripherals for virtual reality, so physical objects that you can touch and control. Right now we're working on gun controllers, rifle type things for shooters, first-person shooter type virtual reality games. We've been around for, since early 2014. We're in, Troy, and pretty much same 2-block radius as everybody else. My background is mostly in, making physical hardware devices, so that's kind of what led us into making a controller type thing.
How did you break into the VR space? Like, what was the defining factor for you?
Yeah, so, for me personally, I was always, a gamer, very young. Played a lot of first-person shooters, Halo, Call of Duty, things like that. And I kind of had this idea for a gun controller like a long time ago in high school, but it was before virtual reality even existed, and the Oculus hadn't had their Kickstarter yet. It didn't really happen, and it was kind of not really a good idea for like the Xbox or PlayStation or anything like that. Once I met my co-founders, and they had actually been backers of the Oculus and things like that, and they're showing me the power of even the DK1 as limited of an experience the Oculus DK1 was. It was really powerful. And just thought, this could definitely work, making really cool physical experiences for it. And so we kind of joined together, made some sample, software games, a couple quick prototypes, and kind of shot off from there.
Cool. Owen, about you? How'd you break into the space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's not really much of an industry to break into yet. You basically have to create the industry, which is sort of what we're all doing. Sebastian has a startup, I have a startup. We're creating new industries, and what's cool about this industry, if you can call it that, is that there really are no experts in this industry. Right. There are big incumbents, like Google and Facebook and companies like that, but at the same time, they're kind of just stabbing around the dark as much as we are. So there is the opportunity for new companies to come out and become sort of the incumbents of the future.
It's got to be kind of a nice thing, right? I mean,
yeah.
It's such a new space. Everybody's learning.
Anytime
sharing.
There's a big tech megatrend like this, there are opportunities for new companies to emerge in the same way that Facebook did or Google did, to emerge and enter the space and create innovations within the space. Right. So, but personally for me, I'm not a gamer. I never have been. I never will be. And I don't really know, like actually Jan was talking about, you know, the behaviors that gamers have. I don't have any of those behaviors. I don't know anything about that. I don't even know what those controllers do. I have no idea. So, for me, so in some ways, I'm actually a good test case for my own product because I don't really, and we're also developing content for non-gamers. We're trying to make VR for regular smartphone user type people, right? But I do have a background in immersive design. So I started working, doing a lot of projection mapping, immersive projections, and then that led me to work in digital planetaria. So I started working in immersive planetarium design. I started working at the Hayden Planetarium in New York City in 2003, and then developed a series of digital planetarium shows, then started working in IMAX 3D, and then a lot of other kind of immersive projection mapping formats. So that all sort of, I was always like, you know, basically in a service industry, you know?
Right.
And I always wanted to have a product. For like the past 5 years, I was like, how do I make a product that can have like exponential growth? And I didn't know what that was until VR became monetizable, became like a product that people actually had in their homes. And then it made a lot of sense for me because my whole background was in design for immersion.
Cool.
Yeah.
It teed it up perfect. Jamey?
How did I break into the VR industry? I'm still hoping to do that. So, like I mentioned, my background is in games, but games for just like PC, mobile devices, and like Game Boy, Nintendo DS, like handheld things. So, the VR game that I made was just made with some colleagues at a mobile game studio I was working at. We do these game jam events from time to time where it's like, try to just make a quick prototype in like 24 hours or something like that. So yeah, it was literally a 24-hour game jam project, and the colleagues of mine I was working with were very excited about VR. One of them had just, you know, gotten a hold of an Oculus. So we made, in 24 hours, a networked 2-player virtual reality game with a steering wheel controller, like everything I would recommend not to try to do in 24 hours was basically what the project was. It was like what I viewed as way overambitious for a project, but it all worked out, mostly because they're very good programmers. And so yeah, that's me breaking into the VR industry. That's how I did it. But that's not what I recommend you do.
What not to do. In this kind of period right now where it's all about adoption for consumers, what do you guys see as things that are hindering or helping this adoption towards consumers? Whether it be gaming or entertainment or any space. What are some things that you're kind of seeing emerge that could possibly be roadblocks or encouraging consumers to adopt VR?
One thing that came up from the question and answer from the last panel is I think there's a lot of competition in the space right now to be like, you know, the de facto standard or like one of the more popular ones. I think just among average consumer, there's not necessarily an awareness of like, which one should I buy at this point? There's a few that have better brand awareness than others for sure, but it's I guess it's not that dissimilar from any other early adoption of hardware, where there are always going to be people who can plunk down the cash for it, and I feel like right now it's in that space. Like I wouldn't buy one at the moment for myself, just as like a consumer. For games, I would kind of waiting to see which is the one that's going to have like the most applications that interest me first. So I'm still kind of waiting. I think it seems like this holiday season, there's like a big push, with a few that might like start to emerge as like market leader more. But right now, I'm not really sure which one, to get. So.
Yeah, definitely to add to that, I think the price point is a huge part of it for especially at Ilium VR, we pretty much exclusively focus on, Vive or Oculus, the high-end gaming ones. And so, you put down $800 to get the headset, and then you got to put down another $800 to get the computer that runs it, and then but also you get the computer, and it's a computer. You have to set up software. You have to be technically apt enough to really like get it actually going. And I know that especially when like the early Oculuses came out, we were kind of just fumbling around for a while trying to get things actually working and optimized well enough. And so I think that's a big hindrance there for a lot of adoption for people.
Right.
I think. Well, I actually worked in the web in the mid '90s, early '90s when nobody knew what the internet was, and people didn't even have email accounts, and so there was a long uptake period before people actually started using the web. What helped that were partnerships, things like the movie You've Got Mail. Things like that, where it started coming into the popular consciousness through Hollywood and other things, and people started saying, oh yeah, regular people like actually send emails. Like maybe I should do that too. So we're trying to actually create a lot of partnerships with other bigger companies that have, so that's what we would call a B2B2C relationship, business to business to consumer. So we have this partnership, and then that creates much more VR awareness and VR acceptance in the mainstream.
Right.
But I think the real issue, which both these guys have said, is really I think content. And I think the thing is that there's not really a killer app yet for VR. There's not this thing where people say, oh man, I got to get a headset because everybody's doing this new thing and I'm not doing it and I got to get in there. So one of the premises that our business is based on is that publishing and sharing content in VR is awkward. No one has found a way to make VR personal and sociable. So that's really what drives what we're doing, because we feel as if when VR becomes a personal and a sociable medium, then that has virality, that has a way that people are going to be sharing it with each other, and it also has a way that it's going to be constantly fresh and updating and new and different, in the same way that you go to your Facebook news feed every day and it's always different, and that keeps you coming back and that creates retention. It's the same way in VR. There's no retention in VR because the experiences are always the same. You do it once, you try it, and then you're not going to do it again. So a lot of people have had VR experiences, they do it for 2 minutes, they put it down, and then it's a one and done experience.
So you think that was more introduced by Google Cardboard being the way it is, where it's kind of built for these short little experiences that are kind of the same every time?
Yeah.
But as technology grows and improves, it kind of will work itself out, so to speak.
It may or may not. I mean, it took... getting back to the web, it took a really long time. It took, about 10 years for the web to become a medium that people went to for content.
Right.
They were still going to TV and they were basically treating the web like a Yellow Pages, right? But then, YouTube, Facebook, things like that came out, and then people started developing new behaviors of going to the web for content. And now it's probably more people are going to the web than television now. So,
yeah, it's definitely shifted.
So it's a process like that, and it needs use cases like that, like Web 2. What was Web 2.0 was the thing that really changed people's behavior, right? So we need like VR 2.0 now.
VR 2.0, I like it. So how can the industry as a whole, aside from partnering with other businesses, help become more accessible for end users? Is it applying your gun controller to be compatible with PlayStation? Is the popularity of certain devices going to start driving where you guys are kind of aiming at?
Yeah, I think one of the big parts is you've got Oculus and Vive, and the earlier problems that we talked about of price point, complexity, lack of content. It can be hard to convince people to buy into those, but then you have something like PlayStation VR where people already know the name PlayStation. They millions of hundreds of millions of people have them in their living rooms. they go, okay, Sony's just making this new cool technology. I'm going to buy into it because I know who they are. They've been doing this for 15 years or whatever, and I've bought every console, that sort of thing. Interactive aspects I think are very important. I think one of the parts about mobile that's a little bit more difficult is that a lot of times you're reliant on a lot of gaze and other things like that, and there are less controller solutions out there to allow you to interact more reliably into the or more immersively into the virtual world there. So systems like PlayStation VR, Oculus 5, they have those controllers there where you can kind of feel around and touch things, and kind of the premise that we have at Ilium VR is not only should you touch those things with these generic controllers, you should be able to touch things like they are real things. And that helps kind of, one of the big parts of virtual reality is kind of just trick your brain into thinking that you're someplace that you're not, or you're doing something that you're not doing. And touch is a huge portion of that. Right. Looking around is a huge portion of that. So it's really important to make sure that we can, one of the accessibility parts are, one, the branding part about the PlayStation stuff and things like that, but also creating a really compelling experience, which Owen kind of pointed to is a huge important aspect of that, definitely.
Plus, like what you're saying about touch, but it's also about not like reassuring your brain, maybe. So, like before you put your headset on, that the Ilium gun you're holding, it's an actual, it's shaped like it. It is, you know what I mean. So when you're inside the environment, it almost helps your brain know it's that much more real that you're looking at it, but you're also holding it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the experiences that we have for people who first just try on virtual reality, and a lot of them, some of them are gamers who are interested, and some of them are people who are not, have never touched a game or not really interested in gaming side of it. They just want to have an immersive experience like that. One of the first things they do is they look down and they're like, where are my hands? Right, and that can be kind of, it's not really immersion breaking, but to have that is a real added plus. And the next step beyond having your hands is to have these sort of things that you can play around with that are kind of realistic.
Yeah, that was one area we found with the game jam game that I was mentioning that worked out really well was having an actual physical steering wheel controller. That helped just make the experience much more grounded, and in a way that I imagine the gun controller helps as well. Just having some tactile feedback to go with all the rest of the sensory feedback, because often for me anyway, personally playing them, that's the biggest area of disconnect. Is reaching out towards something is very natural, but then my hand smacks into the table that's actually in front of me instead of the thing I'm reaching for. That's very, very immersion breaking. So yeah, just being grounded to the physical steering wheel helped get around a lot of the usual issues with disconnect of motion and controlling your body. So I think, more exploration in that area can help make it more accessible. There's always just the issue, I guess, of cost, again, with adding any additional peripherals on top of VR. So, I mean, we've talked a little bit about cost in terms of making it more accessible. So things like cardware is the knockoff, even cheaper version. Google Cardboard is really exciting for me. As a lot of what we try to do at Tech Valley Game Space is we focus on kind of equity of access and what games do in terms of that, making game creation more accessible. And so some of the uses of VR that the previous panel discussed in terms of making experiences that would be very expensive, these educational field trips, and things like that, making those actually more affordable and more accessible is what's exciting to me. And I think there's sometimes a perception on the consumer end, and this is my perception as well for a while, of virtual reality experiences are still the province of people who have a certain amount of money to spend, right? But it's exciting when actually it can become a more affordable way of providing certain experiences to people.
Right, that's when it's really going to take off.
Yeah.
So I was in China earlier this year and on a tour with a number of other VR entrepreneurs. And one of the things I noticed in China was people are super, super stoked about VR. They're really, really into it. Everybody you talk to. Here, you talk to a normal person, there's only maybe 50 or 30% awareness of what VR even is, or that you can have it in your home. There, 100% of people know it, and 100% of people want it. And I think the reason for that is because first of all, they all live in these big high rises, right? They'll live in these giant apartment buildings. And every one of these apartment buildings and shopping malls now are putting in VR arcades in the basement. There's a standard thing. They have a VR arcade where they're providing super high-end VR experiences that are curated, that they know 100%, they have quality control, and they're going to give people a really great VR experience along with accessories like you guys are talking about, other kinds of feedback like wind, 4D, smells, things like that, right? So when people have their first VR experience, it's really intense. It really delivers, right? And so they have that and they say, oh my God, I really want that. I want to have that in my home. Whereas here in the States, people are having these awkward experiences with cardboard, and they don't mount their phone right, and it's all blurry, and then they're playing it on an iPhone 5, and it's bad frame rate, and there's no quality control at all, so people are having a lot of janky experiences with VR. So I think that, more things like that, like these VR arcades, is a way of introducing people to VR, would do a lot as far as adoption.
Now that's a good segue into addiction.
Mm-hmm.
What are your guys' thoughts on VR addiction? Because being such an immersive medium, you lose track of time. Hours become multiple hours. So what are your thoughts as far as VR addiction going forward? Is that going to be a reality? Is that going to be something that is going to be a concern?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, in terms of like addiction in general, I mean, there are addictions for everything, right? I'm sure some of you have seen My Strange Addiction, very interesting show on TLC. But so there are concerns that there are people who could be addicted to them, but the same concerns were for video games. In general, people had the same concerns with movies and TV. And we found that while there are people who kind of take it overboard, the benefits that we as a society have kind of gotten from TV, the internet, video games, and other things like that have kind of outweighed that in a lot of different ways.
One of the reasons I'm excited about VR is I actually think it's kind of the cure for another addiction that we have now, which is screen addiction. Right. Because we spend so much time looking at our mobile devices and our computers and our TVs, and I feel as if when you use VR on a regular basis, it's so immersive and it's so satisfying that you actually don't really want to look at a screen after that. Mm-hmm. And I think that we kind of have these screens that are like coinciding with reality all the time, and all of us probably have some form of addiction to this, right? Mm-hmm. I think actually VR is potentially a way to get beyond that. I always find it was counterintuitive, but what I found is that when I use VR, when I take it off, it makes me appreciate reality more rather than less. So I don't really see this dystopian future that people always say when they hear about VR. I actually see it actually leading us to becoming more engaged with reality and less engaged with technology.
It's funny. That kind of goes back to everybody used to say digital would kill print, and now print's kind of more of a luxury item as far as. So it's good. It's an interesting parallel. Jamey.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question, and like addiction as a topic related to gaming, something that I'm fascinated by and try to read up on a lot of studies related to, because as the other panelists have already mentioned, like it's been a topic around gaming, for a long time. It's by no means a new thing related to VR. I'm addicted to like desert golfing on my phone, for example. Like it doesn't take like I haven't found a difference personally in terms of like being in this immersive environment versus playing a game on my phone. Like I can get addicted to either one equally. But I think, probably like some of the other panelists, I'm interested to ask, and if any of you know, like, if you're aware of other studies about how like prolonged use of virtual reality like might rewire the brain in different ways. Yeah, in terms of like making games that are habit forming, I've been working in the mobile gaming space for a while, and particularly in that space and with like free-to-play, the rise of free-to-play games, I found there's this almost like unchecked assumption among a lot of the designers that I've worked with, that like addiction is this good thing to try, that you want to like try to produce. Like you want retention, right? You want your players to come back again and again, right? So we try to increase that retention metric. Sometimes I found without really thinking about what the actual like human cost of that is. So it is something that concerns me, and I think it's something that all of us like designing virtual reality experiences or games should not discount and should definitely consider when we're designing things. Like, to what extent is the experience that we're providing actually giving back to the people that we're retaining within these experiences? What are they getting out of coming back again and again to that experience?
Yeah,
Right.
Serving up something different, so
Right.
it's definitely more interesting and appealing.
Yeah, well, that's why it's so valuable to have somebody like Jamey who is with a non-for-profit organization, right? I mean, because the capitalism that drives the whole industry is basically saying that retention is the only metric that matters. And so by default, you are developing an addictive product. If you're not developing an addictive product, you're out of the game. Or you will be soon.
Right.
So I didn't want to get into developing an addictive product, but I have no choice because I have a startup. I'm trying to raise money. I'm not going to raise any money if I can't tell them I'm making something addictive.
And like, how does that align to the traditional gaming industry? And like, what are some parallels to it as far as when you're building games in the traditional space? Jamey, you'll probably have a lot to say on this.
Compared to virtual
like,
reality?
virtual reality, yeah.
That's a good question as well. I think, the differences that I've found are still like being explored, like people have talked about how much it's an emerging, VR is this emerging thing, and I've definitely found that to be the case. So it feels like very kind of Wild West at the moment, which is cool. I guess as game developers, we're kind of used to that to an extent. Like there's always some new, it seems like every year that, I go to like game developers conference or anywhere where there's a large gathering of game developers, there's always at least one new like buzzword thing that everyone's like super excited about. And sometimes there are things that fizzle out. And in this case, I think there are things that are going to be around for a while. In terms of design, it's been touched on by the previous panel to an extent, like just the way that you design the physical space and the visuals. There's a lot of things that are different when you're designing a virtual experience. Certainly on the technical side, like I know it's come up a few times, but like frame rate. Frame rate is always an issue for playability, but for a VR experience, it's like absolutely essential that you maintain a consistent frame rate, because I've played some where that was not the case, and you don't want to stay in that virtual experience for very long. My concerns as like personally as an independent game designer around it are like the types of games that I like to make and that excite me as a player are like more social experiences and things that aren't necessarily focused on like visual fidelity. And I feel like VR, by necessity, like there's all this work going into like visual presentation of it because that's such a huge part of the experience. But what I'm interested in is actually the ways that VR is like an extension of games more so than like a completely different experience. So for instance, the way that you use like communication between players and facilitate that. So the experience that I was talking about that I designed that was like a two-player thing, one of the things that we played around in that was very exciting to me about that was one player is like driving this vehicle in like a crowded space and they have to find a particular character in this space. The other player actually didn't have a VR headset at all. They just had like this kind of overview map of this space and a picture of the character that the person in VR had to find. So they had different information that they had to relay, and then the person in VR like wasn't wearing a headset, so they're like listening and communicating to this other person. Those are the experiences to me that are really exciting, and any kind of game like that excites me. So like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, for example.
Yep, I was gonna say that.
Right. Anything that kind of leverages that, like that kind of weird headspace you're in when you're somewhat cut off from the people around you, but can still find a way to interact with them and make it like not completely isolating. Keep like one foot in actual reality, and the other foot in the virtual world. Like that's what excites me anyway about the possibility of VR as a designer.
Great. And then one more question I wanted to ask you guys before we kind of go to Q&A was social. I think social is really one of the factors that helped mobile get where it is now. Can it do the same with VR? I know, Owen, you touched on it a little bit, the socialness of it.
Yeah.
I know there's AltSpace VR, which is making an attempt at it, where it's starting to gain some traction, but I know definitely a long way to go.
Well, I mean, there's a number of different platforms that are working on it. And of course, Oculus is owned by Facebook, right? So clearly, they've got some stuff in the works, as does Google. I think the big stumbling block that people are having, well, there's a number of them, but one of the big ones is avatars in VR are very difficult because we were talking earlier about the disconnect of not seeing your hands and not seeing your body. It's almost even weirder of a disconnect when you look down and you have this body that you're sitting down and your body's standing up, or you're lying on the couch in your body, or your avatar's moving its hands around and you're not, or looking at somebody else trying to have a conversation with an avatar, and you're looking at this weird cartoon character that's supposed to be your friend, and you're like, I just find it to be very distracting, and I feel as if it goes against the sociable component. So I think that most of the social VR apps so far have really struggled with that. What we're trying to do is kind of the opposite of that. So we have a disembodied social experience. And I feel like people have been making phone calls for 100 years. They know how to have a disembodied interaction. It's not really all that jarring for people to do that. But what we're trying to do, and this is why we're generating personified spaces automatically, because rather than have an avatar, you have a space. You have an architectural space, which is a personification of you. So everything in the space represents you. So rather than have this avatar that doesn't relate to you at all, you have like a whole space. And then so it's sort of like when we started wearing clothes and we started being able to buy different types of clothes, we could then use clothing as a way of signifying who we are, right? And then now people don't signify who they are as much with their clothing as they used to, because they're using other things like their Facebook page or their Instagram page or whatever. That signifies who they are. So now I think that VR is going to go even further in that way of being able to generate these immersive environments that really describes who you are, what you like, what your interests are, what you like to do. And I think that that's actually going to take the social component of VR really far. Because when you can when each one of us has our own space that's like fully immersive and really describes, the kind of space that we want to be in, that becomes really engaging and compelling in a way that surfing the web or surfing people's profiles on Facebook, became really compelling for people. I see that happening as well in VR.
It's almost like your VR dorm room, right? You put all your posters up.
Yeah, exactly, right.
You make it yours.
Sure.
So you kind of get that same sense inside that space.
Yep.
Great. Awesome conversation, guys. I'm going to open it up to questions. Any questions? I know there's got to be a ton. Come on. There we go.
Yeah. So we kind of joked earlier about how you're all down the street from each other. What about the capital region, is kind of driving these startups in VR? Because you wouldn't necessarily think, I don't necessarily think of the capital region as kind of the trendsetter in any sort of tech medium. So what is it about, if it's necessarily Troy or this area that you think, you guys at least have kind of started up here?
So what is it about the capital region that's starting to kind of build these tech VR companies, startups?
Yeah, so I think a big portion of it, like at a basic level, is just the entrepreneurial community around here. There are a lot of different places that you can kind of go. There are a lot of companies, startups, and things that are founded around here, just based out of the universities and colleges and things like that. So there's a lot of help to actually just start a business in general. And then, in terms of virtual reality and gaming, there are a lot of resources, like in particular in Troy, right next to RPI. RPI has a really good games program. Actually, my co-founder, Robert, went through the games program. They have had virtual reality research there for a really long time. And you've got, some, bigger name companies like Vicarious Visions and other, players in the game space that kind of are, the talent is already here. You've got First Playable and other things like that. People are coming in this region anyway to with develop games and things like that, and a lot of those skills transfer over. So it can be sometimes not necessarily too difficult to find talent or people who are interested in the space in general and have the skills to do that. Yeah.
Great.
Well, I think this is a great area to be a developer or to be a creative. I think the cost of living, the amount of I think there's just the right amount of stimulation without it being so overstimulating and distracting. I think it would be very, very difficult for us. We also have an office in New York City, but we choose not to have our developers there because we think it would just be way too distracting for them and too competitive and expensive. And then there's an ecosystem here of companies, right? Like, Valence Studios is the new one that's joining us. But then we have First Playable, we have Vicarious Visions. I've hired people that are from Tech Valley Game Space. So there's a whole, I'm hiring people that are their contract ends at First Playable, and then they come and work for us, and hopefully they'll go back over there again. And so we're kind of swapping around. We're collaborating with a lot of the other people. So, and then, we really want to retain a lot of these students that are graduating specifically from RPI, from the gaming program. They come out with exactly the skill set that we need. And typically they've all left immediately as soon as they graduate. So we like to, keep them here in the area.
Great.
Yeah, and that's a big part of our mission with Tech Valley Game Space. It's we are a nonprofit co-working space, but our goal is really to be a community space for a lot of the independent developers who are trying to make VR projects. Like maybe some of yourself are working, from home, trying to get something started. So I grew up in this area, and one of the things that's been really encouraging to me to see, within just the past 5 years, having moved back after a little while, is there's a much larger community, and everybody here supports each other a lot. I mean, I'm sure that happens elsewhere as well, but I think just because we are, a bit of a smaller location population-wise, that's one of the things that's really great to me about the game space. Is there have been so many people who have participated when we've done things like the Center of Gravity had a VR AR hackathon not too long ago, so a lot of our members participated in that, and a lot of folks I see here were also there as well. So there's really starting to be a lot more activity, and as Owen and Sebastian said, there is this ecosystem being built up. So we're trying to help out in another area of that, which is kind of informal education, skill development, mentorship, and get people ready either to expand their own projects or join some of these great game studios or VR startups, and just connect people together. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interaction between, us, even just on the panel here. We started out, we didn't have an office at Ilium VR, and so we were in the Tech Valley Game Space last summer. And, even this summer, Spaceout and Ilium VR, we shared an intern, right? They worked half-time for both of us. So, there's kind of a lot of sharing of both knowledge and resource and other things like that, just amongst, the people who are, we're all close together and kind of working towards the same goal of making virtual reality kind of a really important part of everybody's life.
Yeah, you almost kind of have to work together. I mean, it's just for the good of the advancing it, right?
Definitely.
Good. Yeah, question?
Hi, I'm Jeff from Department of State. And Owen, you mentioned that you compared it to the internet, that the level of the technology or the level of the use is kind of at the beginning of mid-90s for the internet. So, two-part question, kind of, what are the, what do you see as the limitations that are holding it back, and what will open that gate? Is it the level of technology? Is it the access? Is it just a marketing thing? And then a big thing, and I come from the mapping world, the GIS world, and a big game changer for us has been open source. And is there a comparable way to go, a menu for VR, or to go into the open source field, so you're not having to shell out big bucks for a PlayStation or, you know, whatever it is?
Oh, you're talking about open source in terms of hardware?
Yeah. Well, no, not necessarily hardware, but ways to put it in the hands of the public, in the hands of the users.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that we sort of touched on this earlier. It really comes down to there being a killer app for VR that everybody wants to try, that becomes a phenomenon. I mean, we sort of had that with Pokemon Go over the summer, and that was a big changer for AR because it was all of a sudden, you know, became this craze. So we're still kind of waiting for that in VR, and I think, you know, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. Then I just think getting back to some of the other things you were saying, in terms of like best practices for VR, in terms of like now we all know how to read a website. We all know, our eyes are trained. We know where to look for the different things and where the layout is, and there's best practices and standards for how a website is laid out, how to navigate. In the beginning, nobody had any idea, and everybody was just throwing things and spitballing and trying different things out and seeing what would happen. And it took a lot of interaction design and research before people actually came up with those standards. So right now you see this happening a lot in VR, and what's interesting is, you know, the big incumbents, you know, like Google and Facebook, in my opinion, they're using very conservative, they're kind of coming up with their own best practices, but I find them to be very conservative and not really that engaging, not really using the immersive potential of VR in the same way. But I'm sure they've put a lot of research into it, and we certainly are looking at everything that they're doing. Best practices are emerging, but it's probably going to be a couple more years before that really gets standardized in the same way that the web is. And then as far as open source, you know, there's the cardboard viewer here. I mean, we're giving these away, so I mean, you know, you can get the cost down to I mean, it only costs us a couple dollars to manufacture these. We also have I think very affordable device that's a premium mobile VR viewer that we sell for $40. Which is giving you the experience similar to, you know, a Samsung Gear or something like that, and that works, you know. So I think that's pretty affordable too. One thing that almost everyone is using is this platform called Unity, and which is free to download, free to work with, and it's kind of the standard game engine that people are using in VR. So. It's, you know, you pay for it basically in order to publish with it. So if you want to publish with it and not have their logo, you know, you have to buy a license. But it's free to download, it's free to use, and I think that is. And then there's a lot of, like, you know, open source scripting and resources that are out there that can be plugged into Unity. So I think the community already is, on the software side, it kind of is in this open source direction. Yeah.
Tech Valley Game Space too had a great Unity kind of tutorial session, which was really great.
My thanks. Yeah. Quick plug. Yeah, we do free classes at the Game Space at least once a month. So that was taught by Taro Omiya of Omiya Games, and I believe some of the resources from that lesson are posted online on our website for free. We usually put up all the class materials for free on our website, which is techvalleygamespace.com.
Great. Any other questions?
When's the next tutorial?
There you go.
Yeah, we had some requests. We haven't, the way we've normally done it is like an online vote for what the next topic is. So we haven't had any repeat topics yet, but we keep getting inundated with requests for VR. So were you wondering about the next VR class or just the next class in general? Yeah. So we haven't scheduled the next VR class yet, but we probably will do a rerun of that. I would expect it'll be January. But yeah, we post up all like our event calendar on the website, so definitely check that out. Follow us on Facebook and the Twitters and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Great.
Or Meetup.
Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming out and checking out both of the two sessions, and thanks to the panelists.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.